everyone, and welcome to our keynote session for this morning, our second day of the festival. And if you were here yesterday, you'll know what a fantastic day we had with really insightful sessions from Stephen Carver and particularly from Tim Creasy as well on change management. And this morning we have another fantastic session for you. So for those of you that joined our last festival last year and had the privilege of seeing Professor Eddie Obeng in practice, you're in for a treat. And if this is new to you, hold on to your desk. This is going to be fast paced. So I'm Jo Stanford. I head up the Corporate Portfolio Office at Health Education England, and I'm a real advocate for the development of the profession, but also new ways of working. And one of the key things for us in terms of coming out of the 2-year, crisis management that we've had with COVID is where do we go from here and how do we go from here? Because the world we're in now is not the same as the one we were in before. And in this morning's session, Professor Eddie Obeng is going to give you his key insights into what happens next and how can we really leverage the opportunities, the innovation to really take this forward. Now, if you're playing the game code would have come up at the start of the session, and do stay till the end. It's going to be a fantastic session, and capture that game code at the end. This is going to be really interactive, so make sure you say hello in the chat, let everybody know who you are, where you're from, and what you're looking forward to in this session. And do get your questions and answers in the Q&A section as well, because we will be asking those of Eddie at the end of the session. So if we're ready to go, hold on to your hats and let me introduce you to Professor Eddie Obeng.
Hello, hi, thanks, Jo. That was wonderful, lovely introduction. And I've been tracking the festival on social media, as one can. Brilliant, isn't it? And everyone, I hope you're getting lots out of it. So let me just quickly try and set up so we can move. I'm Eddie Obeng, and I'm going to take you through exactly what Jo said. This is moving from the chaos, the complexity, the confusion we've got. Where do we go next? Chris, can you flip me to the shared screen? Thank you very much. So if you were with me last year, I'm going to cover different ground, and I'm going to assume some of you know some of my stuff, so I'm not going to go into everything, but it'll be fun. So normally in the old world, this is my life. You can see I used to teach, I had desks and tables, and then I started moving into this type of world, the funny, weird, technology-based world. I'm going to talk about transformation and what that means. And in that particular digital world, I transformed into looking at the world in a different way. And so I want to share with you some of my personal story alongside this. Those of you who know me will know that I'm an introvert. So I never talk about myself. I always talk about ideas, what's happening, and so on. But I did this equivalent of what we're doing today with PMI, and they were quite keen to understand a little bit about me. And I found that they actually really valued the fact that I was sharing with them sort of what I did and how it all worked. So I'll try and do that as well. I think it'll add some context to what we're going to cover, if that's okay with you. So the journey is going to be quite straightforward. What I would like to do is start with a description of where we are. I mean, knowing where you are is never trivial. In most real situations, knowing where you are is a combination of physically where you are, but also mentally where you are, what your level of understanding is, and a lot more. Chris, can you go back to me for a second? It's difficult when I have to keep breaking. It's a shame I'm not controlling the share as well. But this is how technology works. Okay, so if you imagine that over the course of this presentation, I can cover things like, how do we start to move to change? How do we understand how we start to think together? How do we make absolutely certain that you can run projects in complete uncertainty? What are your greatest hopes? What is it you would really like me to cover? What is it which would make you say at the end, that was the best session ever, I'm so pleased, best 75 minutes of the whole conference. In fact, what I learned was so useful, is the best 75 minutes of my whole life. What are your greatest hopes? So if you could capture that in the chat, and at the start of each one, if you write the word hope, that would be great. But I also want you to answer for me, what are your greatest fears? What is it which, if I did, would make it really literally the worst session you've ever been on, and you'd wish you'd gone to the dentist instead? So that's the second question. What are your greatest fears? So if you can capture those in the chat, I will ask Joe to sort of rapidly read through them and try to give me an idea of what the key elements are in terms of your hopes and fears. And then we'll capture them and move forward with that. Joe, is that okay?
That's fine with me, Eddie. My hope for the session is that I keep up with you.
So Chris, I think I'm going to go back to the share if that's okay. Chris, can I control that, or is it? Okay, so it's a team effort. Or more so, it's like pass the parcel. I say, Chris, can you do it? Then he says yes, and pass. Okay, great. So I hope you've got that. So I don't know if should I run ahead, Joe, while you're reading all the
first hope is in, which is what's the best way to start to clear the fog?
Best way to clear the fog. Best way to start to clear fog. Okay, great. Any others?
Not yet.
Okay, so let me while we're waiting, I'm going to explain something because maybe it's not clear. So normally when you go on a session like this, which is like a festival, a webinar and stuff, it's mostly one way. The speaker talks, there's lots of slide and content, and at the end you get Q&A. That's what normally happens. Is that right? Are you getting any okays in the chat at all?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
I'm really looking forward to this. And
I'm not doing it that way. I'm asking your hopes and fears. Okay, once I know that, then I'll know which tools and stories to focus on. I'm going to treat it like the village school because you're all at different levels. I'm going to treat it like the truffle farmer. I'm going to find all the juicy bits for you, okay? I'm going to give you a link so that you can actually apply what we're doing as we go along. If you want to, and you can see the tools I've got as well at the same time. You will share your surprises. I'll stop at each chapter so you can see at the end online, there's a handbook of some sort, which you can then take from it. So there is a website, which is basically over here, which is QUBE.CCHEE Festival. I don't know if you can see it or not. If you go to that site, all the tools I'm going to go through are there. So you can fill them in as we go along, and there are explanations with them. That's what the web page looks like, so you can find it. So if you don't give me your hopes and fears, you will just get a vanilla thing. If you give me your hopes and fears, you're going to be dancing in the streets. Yay, that was wonderful. Joe, have I got any more yet? Or?
You do. Let me just bring those up. So we've got some more hopes, which is that we deliver collaborative change when needed.
Yeah.
Useful strategies to use to get clarity across the team.
Clarity in the fog.
Clarity.
Okay.
Yeah.
Useful. Okay, that's really useful for me. It's a good insight to get clarity in the team. Okay.
There's another hope to learn how to utilize digital technology to make meetings more engaging.
Okay, how to use digital to make meetings engage. Okay, I'll just put engaged. Okay, great.
Got a few fears come through as well.
Oh yes, please. Thank you.
First, the fears is I won't be able to clear the fog.
I won't be able to clear the fog. Any others?
Next is, what will the public think if we aren't prepared for next time?
Next time was, in theory, statistically, it's in 100 years' time. We tend not to have pandemics both. And everyone, it's current, so everyone's going, the next pandemic. But yes, absolutely. I'm not sure it'll be the same public. I think the ones who are around now will probably be dead, but who knows? I could be wrong. It could be tomorrow. Will public think? Okay.
We've got more hopes coming through. So we've got hope to find the right resources to make our project a success.
Okay, I'll take one more and then we'll call it a day.
Okay. So we have another hope, which is tools to self-manage to build resilience and prevent the chaos from taking you down the plug hole. It's very graphic. Thanks, Neil.
Avoid plug hole. That's a very technical project term, isn't it?
It is.
Okay, great.
We've got a couple more fears if you want to include those.
Yeah, let's get a couple more fears and see.
Okay, yeah. So we exclude intentionally or not diverse voices.
What do you mean by diverse voices? Did they say, or just, okay, I'll just go with that, diverse voices, so okay.
That's representing the various, communities out there and making sure that things are designed to meet everyone's needs.
Okay, got it. Okay.
We have another fear. We continue to think certain delivery methodologies are a panacea to all problems.
Methodologies are silver bullets, are panacea. I can't say panacea. So
I
I
think
just put pan. Can I just put pan?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Can I add mine as well? So mine is, I want to spend some time agreeing where we think we are, okay? And when we've done that, then I want to start to explore why collaboration is important and how that might actually help us. I think the collaboration bit goes with the digital meetings and also maybe this question about how to get people to a little bit of more clarity. I then want to explain about innovation, because the chances are, if it's really new, you're probably not going to be able to use what you used before. And that's going to link into clearing fog. And then I want to explain that the only way out of the hole is to dig a little bit deeper, and how to do that so that you can move through the fog. And at that point, I think we can talk about resources and so on, and the tools to manage yourself so you don't get too depressed. And then I want to move on to a holistic way of shaping the future, give you some concrete tools. But above all, I would like us to have a little bit of fun. So those are my hopes. Unless we're getting any adverse comments in the chat, I'm going on, okay? Then I'm scared you won't actually use the pets. I've given you the link. I'm not sure whether you've gone and started looking at them. So if you do the stuff as I'm doing it, it's the fastest way to learn. I'm scared of zombies. So staring at the screen or looking at your phones, just be involved. I would like us to have a good chat and a good prod. So ask the questions, because Joe's monitoring it. And please take notes. I know I'm trying to make it fun and I'm a professor and stuff, but I'm hoping it'll be concrete and practical as well. So should we get going? Make a start?
Let's go for it. Let's
go for it. Okay. So where I'd like to start is with the question of why collaborate, innovate, and shape the future. There's a quote from somebody I know who's very close to me, which says, if you haven't understood the world you're living in, it's impossible to think that the solutions you're coming up with fit. When you're lost in the fog, especially when you're unsure, how on earth do you actually work out where you are and why? So I'll give you a bit of context, and I'll try and describe what life was like pre the horrible little red monster, red, white, and black monster, which took over our lives for 2 years. Maybe we can go from there. So I don't know whether you remember back far enough, but in the olden days, let's say, I don't know, past. Let's make this the past, and let's make this now, okay? Let's make this, I don't know, 1980, 1990. Some of you weren't born then. Let's make this one here 2022. Let's make it a nice long period of time. If you looked at things like what was happening to things like the pace of change, or the number of people on the planet, or volatility of markets, or scope of markets, if you looked at the speed with which we were building technology, or how computers were improving their ability to program and process every 18 months, therefore allowing them to do some of the stuff which we already did, or if you look at organizations and hierarchies and how their leaders have gone from do more of the same to we too must change, etc. If I described this period from the past to now, for most of those things, now you probably agree is higher than the past. So I tripped over this idea probably in the mid-90s, and I realized, and tell me if this is right again in the chat, that although these points are joined, they're not joined by a straight line. They're joined by a very weird line, which is sort of exponential. It sort of accelerates upwards. And the reason is because the number of people is going up exponentially. The technology uses network effects, and so on. So the world is quite happily getting complex faster and faster and faster. At the same time, if you look at how people learn and plan and change, think about your own organization. You have like a 1-year plan, or you have like a project plan for the next 6 months. For most people, once upon a time, we could learn fast. The world was changing. That's why we have things like budgets. You can plan in the future. But if you look at how fast they've learned and changed, I'm going to guess that although they've learned and changed, let's do it together, it probably hasn't quite tracked the world. So what I started shouting at people about 15, 20 years ago was that, oi, guys, let's have a look at this. We've gone from a very strange world where we could learn faster than the world was changing to a world which can change faster than it can learn. Everyone went, yeah, so what, Eddie? And I said, well, think about it. If you're in a world where you can learn faster than the world is changing, you put the smartest person in charge. They tell everyone else what to do. The people more or less do it. And then good things happen. So it basically means that if you're going to work together, it's quite simple, because as long as somebody knows clearly what's being told them, everything's good, So they went, yeah, so what? So I said, so if I'm over here and I have a crackpot idea, it never ever goes anywhere. Why? Because that's the sensible thing to do. Because we know what to do already. Why should we let the crackpot idea move forward? And yeah, so what? It doesn't matter, okay? And the reason they thought that way was because throughout mankind's history, we've been quite lucky not to have to innovate so much. Think about it. If you are in a world where you can learn faster, the world is changing, and let's go back thousands of years, and you're sort of a tribe of hunter-gatherers, and you're wandering around the plains eating stuff, and there's 100 of you, okay? As long as you eat what you know you should eat, you're fine. So you can sort of tolerate one little weirdo who goes and eats the blue fruit. I mean, if they die, it's okay. But it's that one weirdo, and everyone gives them a little kicking every now and again because they're a weirdo. So innovation was not central to survival or success in the old world. Also, in terms of doing stuff, because the pace is quite slow, you could do what we do with, say, PowerPoints and spreadsheets. I work on it, then I pass it to you, then you work on it, then you pass it to the next person. So we didn't have to work together with our brains. We worked on the work, and then we did like a pass the parcel, like I'm doing with Chris. Can I share the screen? Can I not share the screen? And those were good behaviors. Bad news, once you flip to this side, the modern world, all of a sudden you discover that your ability to know who the most experienced person is broken. People don't necessarily fit. Even in terms of projects, some weird stuff happens. Over here, what would happen is normally you'd know what you were going to do and how you were going to do it. So it was quite relaxed and contained. You could be an expert, you could give clarity of measures and so on. Once you flip to this side, sometimes you know what you were supposed to be doing. Sometimes you know how you were going to do it. Sometimes you wouldn't know anything at all. So I was busy working on this with people. And I was explaining with technology also that the machines have got very clever. Machines aren't like human beings. They're happy to talk to each other. They're happy to network. So as we networked the machines and built the internet, I was trying to explain to people that the machine world was taking over and the machines were starting to look at the way we work. And I was making a fair amount of progress, but people weren't really believing me. I set up QUBE, some of you have been on that, as a way of enabling people, and I'll explain that. And everyone's going, yeah. Well, we can send some PowerPoints to each other. And then the horrid little red monster called COVID came along. And all of a sudden, people went, oh my goodness, we've got to do things differently. We've got to do things differently. Oh my goodness. So what they did was they reached for what they had. I used to ski a lot. And one of the things which happens when you're learning how to ski is you start off with a technique for skiing called snow plowing. And snow plowing is quite funny because you sort of have your knees like buckled like that. And then you sort of have your head and your hand with your sticks. I mean, it's very inelegant, okay? So you start off snow plowing, and then as you get better, you get stylish, and you start to be able to ski much more effectively with your skis all parallel, okay? What do you think happens the first time you come to a really steep, scary slope? You switch back to what you know. So as the little red monster kicked into our lives, everyone reached for the tools they had, whether it was Team Zoom or meetings. We must have meetings. So they just reached back for what they had and snowplowed. And we've been doing that for 2 years. Thing is, now we've got 3 ways you can go. Keep doing what you're doing because you're happy you're stuck in your rut. But we do know people get tired of staring at screens. We know why as well. The science has been done. Horses and cows have eyes on their sides because they're prey animals. They look behind them. Humans have eyes on their fronts. So when you're looking at 20 human beings on your Teams or Zoom screen, basically you're looking at 20 predators all the time. Your crocodile brain's going, your body's filling with all these things which are fight or flight things. That's why it's so exhausting. And you can't actually do any work while you're staring at people. In fact, if you turn and start writing, people go, oh, you're not paying attention. So it's quite difficult to get work done except talking at each other. So one is we just keep doing what we're doing. The second is we actually do worse than we're doing and just say, well, it doesn't really work. We can't really move the culture and then let it decline. And the third is to shape the future to enable us and to build something brilliant. So that's what I'd like us to try and explore and understand. The quote I used to use when I was explaining this new world is I said, people are reacting rationally in this world which has changed to a world they recognize and understand, but that no longer exists, because they were still using the ideas from here. I'm going to stop for a second because that's quite a good place to pause. Joe, are there any questions or comments?
So yes, there's a couple of comments because I put in around, do people agree that the world is changing faster than we can learn to keep up? And yes, there's real agreement to that. So Gareth's put, yes, Joe, we need to upskill and take charge of our own learning. It's certainly shaping a different world.
Perfect, perfect. So when I try and help people, because often you don't realize, I use this little chart, which is called Evolve, Dominate, or Die. And I focus on success. I say, okay, so let's forget about the horrid little red monster, because it's just another change in this thing. But old world, when you could learn fast, the world was changing, when you understood stuff, when you could have clarity, what made you successful? And people say things like experience, our ability to be organized, our good processes. They'll list a whole bunch of things there. And then I say to them, well, in this new complex, fast-changing, chaotic world, what will make you successful? And they'll usually come with a different list, just as you just said. We have to learn faster, we have to engage, we have to build skills. Okay, I've put two different areas in here, which I think are really, really quite crucial. This is one of my friends, it's called Colin Burns, and this is another friend called Joe Ferry. Now, the reason I put them here is to go back to my joke about the weirdos. These are two of my favorite and most brilliant weirdos. Colin used to run IDEO UK, which is a design company. He ran the BBC, so you would have used some of the things he's come up with. He did all the redesign of the BBC interface for users. He now runs Apple. So everything, if you have an iPhone, Colin's the design director behind that. This is Joe Ferry. If you've traveled on a plane and enjoyed yourself, especially Virgin, or if you've ever slept on those flatbeds, basically Joe came up with the idea. These are weirdos. They're nice people. They're fine. They're lovely. They're humble. But you see, they're not members of the tribe. The reality is, when you're driving innovation, members of the tribe don't do weird stuff. So 99% of the people in your organization will talk a great fight, but they will never stick their necks out. So innovation is really hard because of that. So in the old world, we used to kick them, but in the new world, rather than us trying to do the innovation, we have to find the weirdos and enable them to allow us to move forward. It's a very strange thing, but it's very important. If you read the main literature, they'll go, and you too must go on a hackathon. Go and make sure that you can create design things. I worked with a chap called David Kester. He runs the Design Thinking DTA Academy. And I was on like day 2 of the last day of the session. So they've had like 4 days of design thinking, blah, blah, blah. And I come and I talk to them about stuff. And they always would say, why have we got no breakthrough ideas? Whenever they said that, I sort of was embarrassed to say, and I would say it sort of, I really struggled because I didn't want to tell them. And I'd say, because you're good, normal people. You're not weirdos. Weirdos come up with breakthrough thinking. You never come up with breakthrough thinking. And they were very disappointed, but I think relieved that they weren't weirdos. Weirdos look for patterns. They never get trapped in events. So if you look at patterns, you see the world very differently. At the moment, everyone's worried about Ukraine, 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 Ukraine. So what's the pattern? What is it? What's the bigger picture? But we're jumping from one BBC story to another because it hits us emotionally. Weirdos don't do that. They go, what's the whole pattern? They're very strange. Okay, the second thing is collaboration is a nightmare. So collaboration, it sounds great. Oh, yeah, collaborate, let's do some collaboration. Okay, the reason we need to collaborate, I'll tell you, is basically for our survival as human beings. I'll build on this later. So guys, do something with me. Please, can you read the words going horizontally out locally where you are? Even if you're with other people around you, just read them out loud. High speed, as fast as you can. Yellow, blue, orange, black, green. Go, 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 as fast as you can. Say it out loud. Okay, that was quick. Well done. Now I'd like you to say the color and not the word. Go for it. Did you notice you were slower? Of course you're slower, because you're doing two different things. You have the left brain. The left brain wants to read out the word, yellow, blue, orange. But you have a second half to your brain, and that wants to read out the color. The right brain sees context and complexity. The yellow brain, the left brain sees detail and processing. The right brain should be the boss, but the left brain thinks it's smarter. It's a bit like a Dilbert. It thinks it's cleverer than the boss. And that's a problem, because if your left brain wins, you could never get anything to happen. The left brain is crucial because once you're in the fog, once you're in uncertainty, imagine roll back 1,000 years, you're stuck in a forest, there's that noise, there are tigers and things coming at you. In that situation, your brain needs to deal with it. Your right brain is saying, where's the noise coming from? What's the threat? Your left brain is going, was that a tiger? Was that a cricket? Are you with me? Your left brain is separating things into 3 things: obstacles and dangers, tools and irrelevance. That's what your left brain is doing. But together, you're trying to build a story of what's going on. We are storytelling human beings. When you're stuck in this forest, you don't just lie down to wait to be eaten. Why? Because you have a story and you're the hero of your story. Although you're a pawn, you're saying to yourself, I'm worth it. I have to be able to escape, and so on. That story is really important. And that story is something you weave to give yourself a way forward. That process of building the story around it is something which happens in two halves of your very weird brain. So although you feel like one person with one ego, which tells you you're worth it, your brain is split into two, left and right, which do different things. You know, your heart just beats. Your brain doesn't tell your heart what to beat. It has its own little mini brain. So does your stomach. So does your diaphragm. Are you with me? You feel like one person with one story of how great you are. You were born, you went to school, and so on. But you are multiple processing units all combined. Why is that important? Because what you feel isn't reality. And reality is really hard to spot. If you've ever bought a new car, you'll know this one. Before you buy the car, not on the road. After you buy the car, everyone seems to have one. How is that? Because your brain actually sifts out the things it thinks are relevant. So your left brain doesn't pick up everything because your right brain says, look for these cars. And so it only looks for the car. And then when you buy the car, it looks for the other cars. That's why you see more of the car you just bought. It's not because people are driving around you in a circle. The brain has all sorts of other tricks. Like I'll go through this one really quickly, but you can come onto this space. It's in the webpage and come have a look at the joke. But basically, also, your brain fools you into thinking things. So if somebody says something you weren't expecting, and it's really a problem, your brain has a trick for that. Have you noticed, the way I always ask people is I say to them, how does it feel to be wrong? And most people say, terrible. Is that right? Okay. Nope, you're completely wrong. What you're describing and thinking about is how it feels when you discover you're wrong. There's a lovely lady called Susan Schultz. If you read her book or watch her talks, you'll find that out. It's really good. What you're describing is how you feel when you find you're wrong. You feel terrible, but being wrong feels just like being right. They feel exactly the same. So part of the hero story is your brain has a trick to make sure you never feel miserable and bad. So when somebody tells something you weren't expecting, it literally rewrites the software to convince you that the other person's wrong. It's called cognitive dissonance. It's a weird thing. Everyone has it. This is a Dilbert one I will go through. Why should I hire you as a consultant? I use my social process of cognitive dissonance to improve employee morale. Does it work? When people are in an absurd situation, their minds rationalize it by inventing comfortable illusion. Okay, go do it. There's this chap here. Isn't it strange that you have this dead-end job and yet you're twice as smart as your boss? The hours are long, the pay is mediocre, nobody respects your contributions, yet you freely work here and choose to work here. And so the guy goes, it's absurd. No, wait, there must be a reason. I must work here because I love it. I love this job. Next. So your brain literally cannot see reality unless you force it to. So there's some really strange things about you as a human being, and you have to be the hero of your story. Now, why is that important? Because I'm going to take you through and show you a little story, story of how hard it is to collaborate. Presenter spot. Okay. I did a conference, it must be like 2018 or something like that. And at that conference, I had it was the NEC, so it's probably lots and lots of people. I can't remember how many there were. And I was talking about collaboration, and I said to them, yes, well, you know, these things you have to learn. You said you need to learn new skills. One of the new skills, let's hope I've got it. One of the new skills I would like you to learn is how to count to 3. So of course they all laughed because they thought Eddie's making jokes. Come on, technology, it says computer network. Okay, there you go. So they thought I was making jokes. So I said, no, I'm serious. I would like you to count to 3. So I said, look, we're going to count to 3. And I invited someone on stage. I'm going to go through it at high speed. I invited somebody on stage and I said, I need an assistant. So I invited this chap onto the stage. He came up. Let's have a go. He came up to there. I just said, it's you, sir. And he came up on the stage. And as he arrived on the stage, I was saying, put yourselves in pairs. Pair, 2, 2, 2, 2, 2. Okay, he comes up, I shake hands, I go, right, we're going to count to 3. This is how we're going to do it. So what's going to happen is if you're in a pair, make sure you're in a pair, we're in a pair. Okay, so I'll say 1, then he says 2, then I say 3, then he says 1, then 2, then 3. So we start the process of going backwards and forwards, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. And as you can see, he barely gets it right. He gets through one cycle and then he stops and we burst out laughing. We watch everyone. And then I say to them, okay, guys, They can't do it either. We just watch them. I say, stop, 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 stop. I'll tell you what we need to do. We need to replace one with a click of the fingers. So everyone's clicking their fingers now, and we're going 1, 2, 3. And I try it with him, 1, 2, 3. He's clicking, but very quickly he gets out of sync. And you're asking yourself, why would anyone get out of sync? Anyway, we watch the others, and I say, okay, we're going to replace the number 2 now. Stop. We're going to replace the number 2 with a clap of the hand. So we're now going click. The other person claps 3. So I've got the whole group now. By now, of course, they're giggling. Okay. So they're click, clap, 3, click, clap, 3. And I stop them again. And I say, okay, you're still rubbish at this. Let's get rid of the number 3 altogether. So we're going to go click, click, clap, and then jump and slap your thigh. Okay. So you can see us clicking, slapping, and jumping and slapping our thigh. But of course, he's killing himself laughing by now. And so then after that, I stop them and I say, let's go back to counting 1, 2, 3. Okay. And we go back to counting 1, 2, 3. And whereas they couldn't do it at the start, it's really easy now. Do you know why that happened? Why is it they couldn't count to 3 collaboratively at the start, but at the end they could? Are there any comments in the chat, Joe?
The people are going to be keeping up with this question when it comes through to them. But in the meantime, there's been comments about how people learn best from their mistakes, how we use this to build better outcomes. And I think it's that, fail, learn, repeat quickly that's really resonating with people. Yeah,
you've got to do that. But the thing is, the problem with the brain and the human story and everything else is when I put them in pairs and I said, count to 3, I bet I know what they did. I went into a pair and they said, no, you go first. No, you go first. And they were debating who should go first. So one of them went, I'll go first. So they went 1. And they're so proud they've done a 1 correctly. They're not listening to anyone because look, it's not me, the big I am. I'm the hero. The other person, of course, pissed off because they wanted to go first. So they spluttered 2. And then the other person goes, well, what did they say? Could it be 3? And they struggle. But then what I did was I made them click. So they started to relax. I made do stupid things. So they're giggling together. Once they started to laugh and emotionally connect, what happens is they forgot about the big I am, the big ego. So now their brains could collaborate. They could think together. You start always counting the number for the other person. If you want to collaborate, you will need to build a culture where people can relax and have fun, where they feel themselves. It has to be somewhere where people can fail and nobody takes them up on it. It has to be somewhere where they can succeed and you can laugh together. There's a trend at the moment for punishing people who fail. We talk about inclusion, but when somebody's not inclusive, we're really aggressive against them. Not a good plan. You have to make them laugh at what they did wrong. You have to make them enjoy what they did wrong and learn from it, not punish them. If you punish them, then you're creating a non-collaborative culture and it just comes back and backfires on you. So one of the challenges which we have, which is very, very real, is understanding these things don't happen just by themselves. So Joe, I'm going to finish chapter 1. I'm going to ask people just to have a think about what I've covered so far. If I've done a good job, I've explained where we are and what the challenges are, some of the ingredients we need in order to be able to move forward. So if you could capture for me probably your biggest surprise in the chat and maybe what you learned and maybe what you could use in the future. Joe, if you could pick one of each of those out, then we can share and then we can move forward and see what they say.
Yeah, so you can just repeat those for me, Eddie. So it was pick out.
Biggest surprise, what I learned, or how I could use this in the future.
Okay, biggest surprise, what I learned and how I could use this in the future. And while they're doing that, could you share again the link that you did at the start? Because what we'll do is we'll provide that to everybody so that they've got that, so that they can.
Okay. So the link at the start was hold on. It's QUBE. I'll put it up here and make it.
It's to the left, is it?
It's here. I'll make it.
That little one.
Is that big enough for you? QUBE.cchee-festival22.
Okay, that's great.
Okay, so you can go there now. Great. Are there any big surprises from what I've covered so far?
So any surprises from anybody? Just while we're waiting for them to come through, I think one thing that's a surprise. So Francesca put conditioning the brain to the cognitive dissonance as a question. And is that something that you think is what we'd be looking to do? What are you looking to condition the brain?
Yeah, no, you can't. It's billions of years of evolution, but you can recognize it because you can hear yourself. If you say, well, what you're saying is, anything like that, where you're overly aggressive or where you dismiss somebody, you know that's probably you, not them. If if you get extra angry about something which is not personal to you, or extra emotionally grabbed by an idea or something which has happened, you know your brain is wrong. So I've got a friend, and he's literally gone down the Ukraine rabbit hole. He's spending all his time not working, but tweeting about it. He's so emotionally engaged in it, but it's okay, it's outside his life. It's important, but it's outside his life. So I know he's got something crazy going on in his head, but he doesn't know that. But he could, if he looked and said, well, hang on, you know, no nuclear bombs, we're all fine. Sad for the people in Ukraine. We'll have a solution, which is hopefully people talking to each other rather than killing each other. Nuclear bombs, we're all gone. Nobody knows anyway. It's not something I should spend all day on. And anyway, Putin isn't reading my tweets. So I know he's down the rabbit hole, but he doesn't know. So there's nothing you can do because you can't tell, because it doesn't feel any different from being right. Are there any big surprises or anything about what people have got from it so far? There's another point I'd make, which is be really careful. If somebody's explaining something to you and you know the answer immediately, you're probably wrong, because in a world of chaos and confusion, you're probably snow plowing. So if Eddie says, we need to start thinking about collaboration, and you go, yes, I know about collaboration. It's a process of X, Y, Z. You're probably wrong. You didn't hear what was said. So it's very difficult to get out of this fog. I'm spending time on this because I'm going to then show you how to get out of the fog, both as a person and with your projects. Anything to go with here, Joe?
So I don't know if my thing needs refreshing, and it's a bit slow, but I think for me, the learning for the snow plowing is really good, because I think that really puts it into a very visual context in terms of, yes, that's how we've been sort of handling this. And I think we're all probably very familiar with the idea that, you know, you get into this rabbit hole of learning or kind of stuck in a loop because you're afraid, and your fear part of your brain has been triggered, and you don't know how to get out of it.
Yes, yes. Yeah.
So there's a comment from Andy, which is, so today I've learned that my brain is very wrong, and he's put a laugh emoji next to it. Realizing that mistakes lead to learning and progress should be harnessed with humility.
Yeah,
one from Tara.
Very difficult. It's very, very painful and very difficult. But yes, absolutely, absolutely. There's a rule from a chap called Brian Rose, and it's a really important rule if you're going to ever get out of the fog in a positive way. And the rule is go where the fear is. Our tendency is to go away from the fear, but the fear is telling you exactly where the hole is. So if you go where the fear is, it's actually safer than to run away from the fear. Let's go on to the next chapter. I promised you I'd say a few things about myself. I'm going to be really brief, but I would like to give you an idea of how I got to this particular way of thinking. And I'll do it quite quickly. So over here, there's a picture of my mum. Why a picture of my mum? Because my dad died when I was 9 months old. My mum brought me up. She was working all the time. She's pretty remarkable. This is her on QUBE at the age of 90, could have been 90. Actually, as an avatar. How many 90-year-olds you know who do that? So she's pretty cool. So that's why I grew up, basically realizing quite early on that it was important to change. I was brought up initially in Liverpool because she was doing her doctorate when I was born. So I used to have a Scouse accent, which I always think is quite funny. I was then sent to a school in Ghana, a co-ed school. By the age of 10 and a half years, I was at a boarding school. I'd learned stakeholder management, planning, budgeting, and time management. Because if you didn't budget, you spent all your money in the tuck shop. You had no more sweets for the rest of the month, okay? This is my first project. It was a go-kart, which I built from scratch. And I discovered all sorts of other things about projects, like other people don't do what you ask them to do on quality management. Anyway, I left that school. And I continued to move forward. But of course, by then I'd been a loner. My big brother's much older than I was. I went to school at a young age. I spent a lot of my time alone. I felt quite comfortable being alone. I was turning into one of those weirdos like Colin Burns and Joe Ferry. But it wasn't so obvious to me. I changed schools and I discovered culture. I went to an all-boys public school. This time everything was different, not the same. And when you understand culture, you realize that culture influences what people see. So in the same way as you couldn't see that car until you bought one, when you're in a culture, you literally can't see reality until somebody helps you out of it, which means getting past your cognitive dissonance, and then helps you to learn, which means something you have to do with humility. So that was interesting. But what I learned over there was I turned up, at Ghana, I was Eddie. I turned up at Cranley, and overnight I became black. Who knew? And I realized then that people label you and it's all nonsense because they are giving you their view. You don't have to accept anything. The reality is different from what people assume. So that was a useful learning. Then I went on to work at a company called Shell, and that was when I discovered innovation and got my first patent for offshore gas treatment using bacteria, never been done before. It was so revolutionary, and some of you will know about my story about how the experimental program I was doing got, one of the other scientists came basically and sabotaged it, but you might know that. I then went on to learn about things like pinch technology, which meant I understood a lot about energy use, and I left that, and then I went to work at a place called Ashridge. Why was Ashridge important? Ashridge is important because it's a big business school and they were doing things properly, and I was breaking all the rules. And one of the things I did early, and if you're old like me, you might remember, is that the internet used to be the international network of project leaders. And there was a conference at Trondheim, and I went to Trondheim, and I presented my first piece of research. My first piece of research was based around some of the stuff I'd seen. So if you've been following Ukraine, you'll know that the banking system called SWIFT, they're trying to get Russia away from this SWIFT system. Well, I worked on the SWIFT system because it was failing when it was put in 30 years ago. And I advised the project leaders then. And the reason it was going wrong was very simple. They had a project leader who had lots and lots of project experience, but the SWIFT project was very complex because they were connecting lots of different banks in different languages. It wasn't certain what was needed to be connected. In other words, they were unsure what to do, how to do it. They just knew that when it was done, they'd know what it was. This project leader knew how to do stuff and focused on the things they knew how to do stuff and all the rest of the project went to hell. So I went and I presented this. I said, there are different types of projects. Some of them are very clear with goals and methods. Some of them are very unclear. And I was in this big lecture theater. And at the end, somebody stood up and said, I've never heard such rubbish from Dr. Obeng. You know, projects must be clear, have a beginning, middle, and end. Someone else stood up and said, no, Dr. Obeng is correct. Projects sometimes can be uncertain in my organization. And this bun fight broke out amongst the participants, literally hurling insults at each other in this conference. That was fascinating. And that's when I started to talk about different types of projects. I realized I was onto something there. The other thing which was quite important there was also at another conference, and again, some of you know Martin Barnes, who died recently. I went and I presented the fact that soft measures, like we're talking about now, the people, the emotions, the stakeholders, were actually more important than the hard metrics and measures, the methodologies. And everybody shouted at me, and Martin gave me some support. So that was quite interesting. But off the back of that, I came up with this, which is called a bubble diagram. It was my summary of how projects go wrong. So, oh my God, we're late, everything's running wrong, team's unhappy, we lost business. Why does that happen over and over and over again? Oh my goodness, we had to redo it all. Why? Because we made mistakes. Why did you make mistakes? Because the team wasn't trained. Why did the team were untrained? Because we hadn't worked out what they wanted to do. And at the bottom here, stakeholder management, planning, risk coordination, learning and review, and personal leadership and team management skills. And you can look at this later. But I published this and I sort of told people about it, and they went, projects can't be that simple. They must be much more complicated. So about 20 years ago, I started working on this. We built a simulation on it. I wrote a book about it. But basically, projects fail for roughly the same reasons. You don't believe me if I ask you, you've seen a project happening. Do you know what's going to go wrong? You go, yeah, Eddie, we know what's going to go wrong. And I go, so why don't you fix it beforehand? We know what's going to go wrong. We know what happens and goes wrong in projects, but we enjoy the race. The reason I'm telling you this is because I explained weirdos concentrate on patterns, not events. This is a pattern. So I then decided I would try and do something different. So I thought, okay, I'm going to go and try and change the way the world works. I'm going to become Mr. How-To. So I had a problem because I wanted to become Mr. How-To. Some of you would have seen this Joe Rogan thing. Oh, I might manage to lose it. This Joe Rogan thing where Joe Rogan accuses Bill Gates of not doing what he says in terms of health and says he's very ill looking and he's got toothpick arms. If you don't see it, it's the funniest thing ever. But basically, if you're a leader and you're not doing what you say you should do, you're in trouble. So having decided to focus on how to make things happen, I then had to live what I was doing. So I had to start running things by projects. I had to start thinking about my leadership style and so on. At that point, you realize that everything you are doing is just a story. Because when you realize you're doing it, then the rubber hits the road, you get real failures, and then you learn. You know what I mean? So that was quite interesting. But the other thing which I also discovered was, go back to my point about the technology. I realized the world was also moving on. And unless we were really clever, the technology would outpace us. So although I love digital and I use digital a lot, I see it as something to enhance and support us, as opposed to replace us. And that's why I use something like QUBE, because QUBE does nothing. Those of you on QUBE will know a sticky doesn't move until you put it up. It does nothing. You have to do everything. Wrote it up a little bit and then started living it. So that's my life. So I turned from a normal-ish person into a total weirdo with an understanding of patterns, understanding of digital, knowing how people think, not paying any attention to what goes on around us and so on. And I want to stop there because that's quite central to the next few chapters where I'm going to try and show you how to collaborate, show you how to make innovation work, tell you how to make Foggy projects work and people to go along with you and help you shape your future. Joe, good place to stop?
Yeah, that's great. We've had some more comments come through. I think the chat refresh has been a bit slow, unfortunately. And
of course.
the challenges of running multiple technology at the same time. I think maybe what we need to do, Eddie, is get folks together in QUBE to do a proper session face to face. Sure,
we'll do that. We'll do that. Okay, so Joe, if comments come through when it refreshes, please just shout them out and interrupt me. Yeah.
Yeah. No. There's some interesting reflections on the surprise and learning and how to use it. So I think we've got a comment from Raquel, which is 1, 2, 3 is a great practical exercise to challenge assumptions and bring people into the same emotional frequency to then connect. We need to assert this need more often. I think that's a good comment. Culture influences what we see from Craig, which is very true. And Beverly laughed and said, I can relate with the skills learnt from boarding school.
Yes, I know.
There too.
Brilliant. Okay, so what are we changing to? We talked about 1, 2, 3, and you've picked that up. But there are a couple of other really crucial things. As human beings, we're actually in a pretty interesting existential state. There's a great book called Sapiens where he talks about how human beings manage to sort of move together, the importance of competence hierarchy so people get better, but also, as we saw with wars in Yemen and Ukraine, they can be a threat to each other. But normally we do this weird thing where we compete but collaborate. Imagine you're playing a game of, I don't know, football, tennis. You know, if it's football, somebody doesn't suddenly stab the football and bring a brick. We collaborate and then we compete. Very weird. And when things don't work, we have this inbuilt reboot facility, either rewiring our brains or changing jobs or whatever else. Human beings are amazing. We have a massive storage in that all those processes we have. Our processing is really great, but it's really sensitive to what you hear first. So if you are not, the car example, if you haven't seen the car, you don't see it. Once you've got an idea, you then move forward with it. The example I always use is me and my sister. When I was doing my MBA, I studied Donald Trump's Art of the Deal as part of the course thing. That's like 30 years ago. Then I heard he was running for president. I don't care. And then my sister started saying, oh, he's an orange, racist, horrible man. And I went, oh, it's just a businessman. I remember him from there. Her framing came from CNN. Mine came from trying to pass exams. Therefore, we were seeing completely different worlds. Isn't that just brilliant? And also, people are prone to running what I call irrelevant subroutines just for fun. We all have different beliefs, we all have different religions, and we think it matters, but it really doesn't, because when you get on a bus and the bus is doing 60 miles an hour, you're all doing 60 miles an hour. You with me? So a lot of things we do run in our brains are very important, but actually they're not real. They are our inventions. And we do this all the time. And when we confuse the real with not real, we come to the wrong solutions. Go back to my comment. Unless you know where you are, it's very difficult to know how to solve it. Our architecture is complex with all these two little bits. Bad news, we only transfer data at the speed of speech. I'm talking really fast. If you were reading, you could read 4 times faster than I can speak. Like, I think it's 250 words per minute when you speak and much faster when you write. I can't remember the numbers. Go and look them up. Network protocols. Every time we try to work together, 1, 2, 3 gets in the way with egos. And if you try and force people to learn, they resist really actively. The machines are coming our way. They can do the stuff we can do. So in order for us to be able to deal with the machines which keep threatening us through AI, through machine learning, through robotics, and so on, unless we're going to say the future belongs to the machines or belongs to transhumans, which is a very popular idea, humans with a bit of machine in them, it's very trendy. I'm not in that world at all. I'm in the human world. I love people. I love our experience. I love our laughter. I love our food. I love those things. I'm not in hock to tech. I think tech should work for us rather than the other way around. So I think we have to start thinking about different ways of working. So for example, when you're on QUBE, we teach you things like write first, talk second. so we can get the thought faster, so that you can actually transfer the data much faster. Disembodied is really important, because what's important is us starting to work together rather than you saying, you look like my old geography teacher, I'm not sure I can trust you, etc. Participation is really important. That's why I need your chat. Being open is important, and applying your learning as you go is important. These things are really difficult to do, but if you can get the right culture, you can set the right environment, you can start to do them. I'm going to skip this one, but if you get a chance, look at the PET called Circle of Inclusion. It's a way to get people into those things really fast. Because I want to come to this one, which is innovation. People are terrified of innovation. Firstly, the big tribe sees innovation as something which the weirdos do. Then people ask them to do it. I had an interesting project this year where I'm basically working on innovation in the Church of England. Okay, which is what's known as difficult, because the church is supposed to stay the same and then you're trying to do innovation. You see the problem. So how do you do it? Well, obviously, just suggesting the idea, everyone says no. Can you see it? Resisting upgrades actively. We talked about that. Also, they're all good, nice, decent people. It is the church. They're not weirdo people like me and Colin and Joe. So I had to find a way to bridge that cultural gap. So I gave them an analogy so that they would know innovation was okay. And the analogy I chose, I thought was quite funny, which is Rolls-Royce cars. So I had a Rolls-Royce car, and I think I said to them, you know, what's similar about these different cars? And they said, they're all Rolls-Royces. I said, how do you know? Well, they sort of look Rolls, oh, the grill. And I said, well, let me tell you, they've spent 100 years innovating, and they managed to do that because they know what to keep the same and what to change. So for example, the height is always twice the size of the wheels. There's always this flying thing. I don't know what that's about. Every single design is made up of 3 curves. In your case, it could be Father, Son, and Holy Ghost. I don't know. And when you're in it, it should be like you're in your drawing room or your study. So as long as you have that, it replicates, and you can innovate within that. Once I'd given them a framework for innovation, they were happy. When the framework was not there, it was foggy and they were terrified. Do you understand? And that's why we have to explore how fog works, because without understanding how fog works, people can't move forward. Joe, I'm going to stop that chapter at that point. Are there any comments about what to change to, or can I now run all the way to how to make fogs 100% successful?
I think we're good to carry on, but the questions are starting to come through. So, so there's things to kind of reflect back when we get to that point, unless you wanted to take some now.
Take one.
Okay, let's have a look at the questions then. So, one moment. How can someone who concentrates on patterns versus events look in project management? Are they identifiable? Yeah,
I mean, if we get there, I'll explain to you, projects are pretty predictable all the way through. So if you're looking at patterns, you can say, I'll give you one of the patterns I use. When I see a project, I ask myself, do I know what they're trying to do? Do I know how they're going to do it? My nickname for those is paint by numbers, if you know my stuff. Okay, and then I ask myself, do I know what they're trying to do, but unsure of how? I call those going on a quest, if you know my stuff. Do I know how I'm going to do it? But not sure about the outcome. I call that a movie. Like you play around in your camera and you try and upload it and hope you'll get lots and lots of views on YouTube, and you never do because the script is missing. So that tells me a lot about the project, or am I unsure about what's to be done and how it's to be done? And that's what I call being lost in the fog. Okay, so I start with that because I know that foggy projects are going to have lots of emotion, scary, paint by numbers, lots of confidence, lots of passion from a quest. I also know that some projects are internal. You're doing them inside the organization. Therefore, you get more politics. I also know some projects are more visible than others. So building HS2, you can see the rail. You can see them digging the holes. Writing a piece of software, changing a culture, you can't see anything. It's invisible. So if somebody comes to me and they say, here's my project, I go, is it paint by numbers? No, it's foggy. Is it internal or external? In other words, is there a contract with money changing hands, or is it just politics? It's politics. Is it visible or not? It's not very visible. You can't see progress. We won't know. So a foggy, invisible, internal project. I know it's going to be hell. I know what's going to go wrong, even before I start. So the pattern tells you the detail. But what's really crucial, and the reason I was drawing this, was as the world sped up, and we saw this before, we moved from basically doing paint by numbers And as it got faster, we moved to quests and movies. And the faster we learn, the faster we move away from the fog. That's something to remember, because the fog is where you're uncertain. But I have to let you in on the secret, and the secret is very simple. A butterfly is not a caterpillar with wings stuck on it. You don't just take a greedy caterpillar, okay, I'll try and draw a caterpillar with lots of legs, and then stick some wings on it and then turns it into a butterfly. No, 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 no. A butterfly is something altogether different. What's the core competence and behaviors of a caterpillar? Walk a lot, eat leaves, and so on. Walking a lot and eating leaves. Paint by numbers. Yes, I know which leaves to eat. Let me go in search of leaves. I know how to chomp and eat leaves. Let me do that. There, it's that side. It's not foggy. Butterfly is something completely different. You can't go to a caterpillar for flying instructions for a butterfly. They can't even conceive of it. The thing is, a fog exists because of the chaos, because of the uncertainty. But it's a three-way door. Door number one, you feel uncertain in chaos. You learn the things you need to learn. Suddenly it becomes clear what you have to do. You can drive the process through parallel prototyping. Suddenly it becomes clear how you're going to do it. You can bring out your agile box and start to do your sprints. Suddenly it becomes clear what you've got to do and how you're going to do it. You can bring out your waterfall. So fog has a door which lets you back into the world which you're in. It also has two other doors. One door goes up and the other door goes down. If you go into chaos and you don't learn, you end up in hell. In other words, if you've seen any of these like good horror movies, they're sailing along, suddenly they get into a fog, and when they come out the other end, they're dinosaurs eating, etc. Basically, you can go through the fog and end up in hell. Or you can go through the fog, learn, continue, figure out, and end up with a future which you actually want. Fog is really useful, and it's important to understand how to make it work for you. I explained earlier about the importance of going where the fear is. If you're nervous about fog, you're not going to get there. The hope that we'll be able to tell our team members with clarity, that just tells me you're not happy in the fog. So you have to get used to that feeling of not knowing. Otherwise, you can't move forward in the fog. Foggy projects have processes. So even if you're not good at them, you can just follow a process. I'm going to share with you the process which I use. I use it just like being lost in the fog. Imagine you were lost in the fog. We're all lost together. What do? We stop. We go, is anyone there? Then we, yes. Then we grope our way towards each other. When we find each other, we hug, emotional connection, hold hands, communication, strong, continuous, non-stop. Then somebody says, what should we do? Are you cold, wet, and miserable? Yes, we are. Then you describe the opposite of being cold, wet, and miserable. So we want to be warm and toasty. Yes, that gives people a fake purpose. It's not a real purpose. Okay, let's take one step. So you take one step. Everyone there, how are you? You review what you've done and so on. There is a methodology for moving through the fog. Even if you're not comfortable with it, you can just use the methodology. And here it is. It basically says, seek and identify the stakeholders. Are you there in the fog? Establish communication methods. Gain problem agreement. Everyone cold, wet, and miserable. Describe the opposite of what you pretend that's the vision. Resource the core team. Sticky-step planning. I'll show you how to do that. Take a step. See what's going on. Review what's going on. Make sure you've made some progress. Capture what you've done. Do it again. Do it again. That's how you move through the fog. So even if you're not comfortable, fine. No worries. That method is what we call the classical traditional approach, which is how we run almost all projects, which is looking through the rear view mirror. We use reviews and things like that. From the point of view of somebody who's actually running that project, this is what you would need to be a leader. Be calm, communicate widely, listen to people, build trust. How do you build trust? Very simple. Promise to do something, do it. Remind people you promised you're going to do it and you did it. If you repeat this 4 times, people start to trust you. When they trust you in the fog, you don't need to give them clear instructions. You can give them the problem and they'll come back to you with solutions. If they don't trust you, you have to give them the solution. Okay, and that means you're not able to move any further forward. Your team is primarily made up of people who like solving things and people who are nice and human. It's useful to have some people who act on things, some people who check things, but not very helpful if you have people who just want to use their experience. Tends not to help you, they just do what they're familiar with. Sticky step planning is in the pack. It's very simple. All you have to do is pretend you've done what you're going to do, and then you brainstorm backwards to say what you must have done to get there. And again, if you're stuck, as Joe said, we can always show you how it's done. So building that method in the fog is important. But people won't move through the fog as stakeholders unless they think there's value. This is a piece of work I did with guys from a university quite recently to try to get them to move out their fog. They were saying things like, we do not have a way to make sure students are engaged fully. So I said, okay, what's that? That's a gap. That's the difference where you are, where you'd like to be. They went, yes. I said, what happens if you don't fix it? They said, well, students might lose their mental well-being. They won't get through the course stuff. We'll have to work super hard as tutors. They might fail their exams. Then they'll drop out. The lecturers will be demoralized. The university will lose prestige. The college will lose income, and we'll all go bust and be miserable. I said, that's really bad if you don't fix it. They said, yes. I said, tell me what will happen if it's fixed. They said, oh, well, maybe we'll get more and better learning. There'll be visibility of the workload. The students will be able to prove they can apply it as they go. The college will be able to maintain the results. There'll be asynchronous learning. We'll be able to reach students in countries we can't. We might even get more money, and we'll decide the new way is better. Oh, my goodness, that's good if you fixed it. So why haven't you done it yet? Oh, they said, the reason we haven't done it, we don't know how to communicate with the students. We don't have an engaging way of delivering. Many key decision makers just want to wait. Remember, I told you that the people were in the rut, and then some of them are just going to go down the bottom. They're just waiting. We've assumed we have control of our students, so it doesn't really matter whether we engage them or not. We've only just learned about QUBE, and we haven't got a business case. So I said, oh, well, that case, that's good. So let's look at how much investment you need to make. So let's understand what your value at stake is. If you do nothing, how much will that cost you? Oh, 20 million a year. If you fix it, how much will that get you? Oh, maybe 200,000. So there's 21,000 million in the middle. How much would you invest to make this happen? So this is really important for stakeholder engagement because it gives them a reason to go through the fog. They don't need to know the detail, but now they have the emotional connection. They have a financial outcome. They can see what's going on. Even if the butterfly isn't fully formed, they have a sense of what the wings are going to look like. So that's quite crucial as well. So I'm going to stop at that point. If I've done a good job, oh, there's one other thing. Let me do one other thing, which is quite important. Foggy projects. I described earlier how you go through the fog one step at a time. And I'm going to just really push this one because most people mess up their foggy projects because they run them as if they're not foggy. Foggy projects are unclear. Look, there are effectively 3 ways you can make something happen. I've got down here the word here, and I've got the word there at the top, okay? So there's 3 ways a project could happen. You could start it, and it all goes perfectly to the end. Does that happen to you often? No. Okay, second method, you can start off roughly on track, okay, maybe a couple of weeks late, and it's a bit foggy, and you're wandering around, or maybe it's not foggy, maybe it's, but you're not checking, you're not reviewing, you're not seeing how the stakeholders feel, you're not doing a sticky step plan to see how am I making the steps, you haven't done a gap leap, so you don't know what the wings of the butterfly might look like, you're wandering off track. How do you feel if you are wandering off track, but you don't know you're off track? You feel happy. Why? Because being right and being wrong feel exactly the same. So you're off track. And then somebody said, look, you spent £6,000 and we've got nothing to show for it. So for 2 days, you have to do reviews. You're a bit miserable. Oh, sorry, I should have done it the other way around. Miserable. And then you set off again, wandering off track, but not knowing you're off track. How do you feel? Wonderful. Then there's a bit of grief. When am I going to have to cancel your project? Etc. And then finally, hopefully you arrive. So that's method number 2. Most of the time, you're happy with that. I'm going to suggest method number 3, where basically every time you see anything you're unsure of, you break it into 5 time-based areas. You set off, and immediately after the first 5th, you sit and you say, are we winning? And you discover you're way off track. And so you're miserable because it's a disaster and nobody's bought in and you have no clue. And your sticky step plan has just changed 5 times and the stakeholders don't have a gap leap. Then you set off again, you check again, you're miserable because you're off track. Every time you check, you're miserable. So the rule with foggy projects is if you're not miserable all the time, you're probably messing them up. That was a joke, that was a joke. Okay. But it's important to be able to review and to have the discipline to review, if that's okay. Joe, I'm going for a learn by sharing. Any surprises in the last piece? If I've done a good job, I've set the context of why foggy projects are important. I've explained to you that even if you don't like foggy projects, there's a method, a process you can use. I've given some hints on how you could behave, what emotions you could use, what actions you take as a leader to get people to follow you. And I've also explained some of the key elements like engaging people and reviews. Are there any questions?
Hi, sorry, I was on mute.
That's all right.
Not the first one for today, so I don't get that prize. But there's a couple of good comments in the chat as well. So just been catching up with those. Stephanie's put in, go where the fear is. I love this. I think we all need this little reminder push every now and again.
Yeah.
Understand and listening to your target audience is key for success. That's from Mark.
You really have to listen to them.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a couple of tricks when you're listening to people, which is they'll stop talking. And there's this thing called a reflect statement. Just repeat back to them the last 3 words they said, or 5 words they said. 3 is easier, verbatim. Try it. You'll find they keep talking. So what people tell you is what's at the front of their mind. When you repeat it and they keep talking, they go a little bit deeper. And so you get better insight. And if you do it again, they get even deeper. So when you listen to people, you can listen to them and they'll tell you what they already know, which is useless in the fog. What you want is the thoughts they haven't dared verbalize in public. That's what's useful. Those are the insights. That's where the patterns are. Great, thank you. Any others?
Well, that was a really good one that I'd be taking to a meeting later. That's going to be quite critical.
Critical, yes.
Last 3 words. Gareth put, brilliant. Using areas of familiarity is a great idea to get others on board by telling them the story.
Yeah, fantastic. Brilliant.
Neil's put a comment about the Rolls-Royce story is great, as great analogy. Uncertainty without any guardrails equals chaos, but those minimal guide rails parameters provide the foundation for certainty of which to innovate from. So again,
correct. Which is great for 99% of the tribe, 99 of the tribe, because the weirdos, we don't care about the chaos. In fact, we love it. So just remember that. And if the whole tribe was weirdos, we'd go and eat some of those blueberries and we'd all be dead. Okay, so thank goodness the tribe is mostly sensible people who do sensible things. Okay, so let's go to the last part, which I want to share with you, which is this transformation, the butterfly transformation, and what it means and how we move forward. As the world gets more chaotic, and I've tried to explain that there's a lot of noise, many, many events. There's lots of trendy things people talk about, even with leadership, authentic leadership, servant leadership. There's tons of noise everywhere. You're not sure what to focus on. With projects, there's methodologies, there's thinking process, tons of stuff. But the reality is the patterns are quite simple. So one of the things which I also realized was that as the world gets more complicated, it's too dangerous to spend tomorrow fixing today's problems. So it's more important to look out the front view of the car rather than looking out the right rear view mirror. If you look at most project managers and you look at their diaries, you'll find most of their time is on reflection, review, reporting. That's just looking backwards, like 75% of their time. What you want them to do is look forward. So the question is, what do they look forward for? And some of you would have remembered the plane which went into the Hudson. Okay, hit a flock of birds and it flew into the Hudson. And I'm not going to play it with sound or anything. Let me get the volume down. But basically, they hit a flock of birds and then they have to do something about it. It's a glide path. They couldn't go anywhere. They had to go into the Hudson. So if you had a project and you took out the project manager, what would happen to that project? What's the glide path? So for Foggy projects, I thought it could be quite interesting to try and understand that. I'd love to watch the video, but you can watch it later. Okay. So I'll tell you how I approach projects these days, which is not thinking about the rear view mirror, but looking out the front. And if I can find it, slideshow, oh, come on, it must be here somewhere. Don't do this to me. Glide path, got it, okay. So the way I treat projects with my clients these days is, we do the sticky step plan. We know what's going to happen in the project. We've had the discussion. Then I say to them, all projects have patterns. Let's think about this project in a specific way, running from defining it, refining it, developing it, and implementing it and reviewing it. On this other axis, I've got the stuff from that bubble diagram I showed you, the one I built at Ashridge, which is basically leadership and teams, planning, coordination, learning and review, stakeholders, and purpose. Okay, so the same thing I had on that chart. Then I say, okay, let's sit in a room and let's brainstorm what we think is going to happen. I've written these quite big so you can read them. So what's going to happen at the start? I said, it's a Foggy project. They say, oh, what's going to happen at the start is early on, we'll have unclear goals, we'll have unknown obstacles. Please put your stickies up. And they tell me all sorts of things like politics. Oh, sorry, I went too fast. Let me not frighten you. Non-scheduled things come along, no plan, blah, blah, blah. They tell me all the things which you'd expect in a Foggy project. Like I said, if it's foggy, it's got change in politics and it's invisible. So we work our way through all the things we know are going to give us hassle in that particular project. Great, well done. Then we go, well, we know all these things, so why don't we pre-eliminate them? I've made it smaller just to make more space to write in. So we go with each one. Unclear goal. We're going to do the gap leap really early on with the clients to fix that green thing. What else will we do early on? We capture all the things we'll do right at the start to get rid of the things which are going to scare us. Then we go, right, what else should we do? Well, the things we could do a bit later, we've done those in gold, which will also get rid of them. What that means is you very quickly get to a point where all of a sudden the project has gone from the big project with the complexity to this is actually what you'll have to manage in terms of chaos and uncertainty. If you're managing less, that means tomorrow is more likely to look like what you imagine it will be. You won't waste tomorrow fixing yesterday's things which you didn't deal with. Pre-elimination, that glide path, looking to the future, that's really what I'm trying to focus on as the actual project management job, especially in the fog, because in the fog, it's so emotional and people are so scared of getting it wrong that if you don't do that, they don't support you, they don't trust you, they don't follow you through. So that's really my last chapter, and then I'm going to try and wrap from there. So if I've done a good job, I've taken you on a journey to help you understand where we are, what it means, picking up the elements of both collaboration and innovation, helping you to understand how those work. And then with the fog, it is really easy to run a fog, even if you're not a weirdo. There's a process, there's a method. But things to note, if you want to shape your future, big headache. I took you through one of these curves. It's called the rate of learning versus the pace of change. There are two other curves, and you have to be aware of these. That's why the world feels so miserable. It's not miserable. It's a wonderful world. We have a wonderful future. But two things have happened. Firstly, we've accelerated access to cyberspace, swish, swish, swipe, swipe, etc., which means that people can get information to us really easily. I was on my tablet yesterday, and Twitter had told me something about Ukraine and Russia. I'm not following the events, but the news comes and finds me whether I want it or not. They throw that at me. My ability to understand and utilize this information has gone down. So as we move to the virtual world, more of what we see, we don't understand. We're doing full-time jobs. What does that mean? We have no time to research it. So by default, our opinions are not our opinions. We buy them or we're given them by other people. And people have learned how to do this. So they can make us scared. They can show us a photograph of a child. Our hearts beat. We get all emotional, like my friend I was describing. And at that point, our view goes crazy with our cognitive dissonance, and we're wrapped up and we start supporting what they want or buying their products. That is really dangerous, but it is the norm. If you don't understand that your opinions are not yours, actually they're someone else's, and you then treat them as conclusions, your world will look completely logical to you, but actually you're, am I allowed to say batshit crazy? You're batshit crazy with your cognitive dissonance, but you don't know, and it feels great. The other thing which they've done to us is by making things more complex with the connections, it's harder to see the patterns. So when you're shaping your future, my advice would be this. Watch out for things which come along, which trigger you, fear, emotions. Over the past 40 years, everyone in marketing knows how to do this. Everyone in politics knows how to make you scared, make you react. They tell you stories, you respond, you go on marches, not your idea. What you want to do instead is you want to be able to create your own reality. That means when you feel emotionally hit by something, you know it's not real, concentrate on the people you love, concentrate on the work you love doing, concentrate on the things which you can actually focus on. And if you hear something and you're not sure, use this little chart to check reality. First, baby method. Somebody tells you, everybody who is, I don't know, a project leader has had a heart attack. I'm just making it up, okay? You go, oh, is that real? How do babies check that? Baby sees something, touches it, puts it in their mouth, tastes it, multiple senses. What you do immediately is you phone up all the project managers you know, and you go, have you fallen dead? They go, no. And then you phone up an undertaker and say, have you had any project managers? They know. So you go, oh, that piece of stuff is just nonsense. So there are methods you can use to check so you don't get into a culture or into cognitive dissonance, but you have to want to do it. You talked about the humility of knowing you were wrong. Guys, I'm stopping there. Are there any other final comments? Did we cover your hopes and fears? I'm going to check it on the board and then read out. You wanted me to make sure I could give you stuff about clarity, some strategies for working the fog. the best way to start to clear the fog, I'm sorry you can't clear it, you just walk through it. And then we talked a little bit about holistic visions and so on. I think we did that. The fears, methodologies, I gave methodologies a bit of a kicking, but also you know how to use a methodology on the fog. And then there was also including people. And we talked about that when we talked about QUBE and the importance of getting the brains to connect and how you have to give people time and spin cast and stuff like that. Joe, we have hit the buffers. Can we have like 1 or 2 comments to wrap?
We can. And if you're happy, we've got a few questions that have sort of come in last minute. Would you be okay if I email them to you and get a comment and we'll post
Email them to me. I will respond immediately. Well, not immediately. I will respond in due course. But that link also gets you on QUBE into the room we've just been in. So if you want to come and look at some of the stuff which I've got in there, and when we get the recording of the session, I'll drop it in that cubicle as well.
Okay, that's great. And as you've been talking, I've been capturing and adding in the performance enhancements tools, so the templates that you've talked about. So what people need to do, they'll need to refresh their browser for those all to be visible after this session. So it'll suddenly all magically appear. Then the most voted for question is there a danger, especially in the NHS, in assuming that digital projects are necessarily about things and not people?
Yes, everyone does that. I would say 80% of the time, they put the digital technology before the human needs. Now, this is the nightmare. I have a pen here. This pen is pretty rigid, so I have to wield it. It doesn't wield me. You with me? Human beings are more flexible than digital. So if you put the digital first, then it enslaves us. We have to type a certain way. We have to use our phones, pushing our heads forward. It drives your behavior, it drives the processes in your organization. And the digital doesn't care about you. Usually it makes you miserable and frustrated. If you start with the human needs, with the human objectives, and then work back and say, well, what technologies can enable us to do this? That is much safer. The problem is they keep hiring people with job titles, which are things like digital lead and digital this. If my job title is digital lead, guess what I promote?
Absolutely. There was a comment yesterday that were from one of the speakers that sort of said, if all I've got is a hammer, then every problem is going to be a nail.
Absolutely. Brilliant.
Okay, so we have run out of time there, and thank you so much. That's been fascinating whirlwind of activity and engagement and real fabulous insights. And I think this is something that collectively we can maybe support as a community to keep coming back, to keep working on, looking at how we can support people to keep looking forward through the windscreen and not looking back. Yeah. So again, thank you so much, Eddie. That's been fabulous.
Thanks for inviting me, and good luck, everyone. Change the world and make it better. Make it human. Don't become transhumans and don't let digital win.
Absolutely. Here.
Bye.
Thank you all. Thank you, everybody. And if you'll get ready for a quick break before the next session, all of the comments, the tools, the video, we'll make sure that they're all available. And like previously, this will be available on demand on the site. We normally recommend that you speed things up to watch them. This one, we recommend you slow down so that you can keep it ready. Thank you all again. See you in the next session.